today, Physics Today, and Physics World. Also check out yesterday's essay written by Garrett Williams, and stay tuned for 3 more essays coming out over the next 3 days. Lastly, I will start with some pre-written questions today, but please write your questions in the Q&A feature, not the chat feature, here in the Zoom to help us best organize the questions. Finally, we have so many wonderful events left during the rest of the week, so please do get involved and spread the word. Now let's get right into it. First, we have Lauren Chambers. Lauren Chambers is a PhD student at UC Berkeley in the School of Information, where she studies the relationship between data, technology, power, and government. She received her bachelor's degree from Yale in 2017, where she double majored in astrophysics and African American studies. Her undergraduate African American studies thesis, A Different Kind of Dark Energy, Placing Race and Gender in Physics, examines how physics and astronomy theory and praxis are influenced by race, gender, and identity. After college, Lauren spent 2 years in Baltimore supporting NASA's James Webb Space Telescope mission as a software developer, and 2 years at the ACLU of Massachusetts using data analysis to support legal and legislative advocacy campaigns. Next, we have Sophie Martin, who is a first-year PhD student on the I4Health CDT at University College London. She received her Master of Science degree in physics from Imperial College London in 2020, before deciding to use computational skills towards advancements in healthcare. During her PhD, she hopes to bridge the gap between research and the clinic using explainable machine learning methods in brain imaging, particularly for the early detection of dementia. Outside of her studies, Sophie is passionate about improving the representation of Black and underrepresented groups in STEM. She is the director of media and marketing for the Black at Lab family, a social enterprise which aims to represent, connect, and inspire Black minds in the UK. Next, we have Marika Edwards, also one of the organizers of Black in Physics Week, and a Jim Fellow at the University of Florida, working towards her PhD in astronomy and advanced manufacturing engineering. She earned her BA in computer science and theater production/engineering at DePaul University, and her BS in physics and astronomy and mechanical engineering at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Her research includes galaxy evolution, instrumentation, cosmology, and dark matter/dark energy. Marika has served on the board of and founded student chapters of multiple organizations, including Black in Physics Week, which I mentioned, and she is the champion of academic excellence, school life balance, and community service and outreach in her universities and local area. We do have one more panelist who will be making her way in shortly, and that is LaNell Williams, who is a PhD student at Harvard studying soft condensed matter physics. Her research interests include an in-depth analysis of the physics of self-assembled systems by studying the assembly pathways of viruses. She graduated with her BA in physics at Wesleyan University in 2015. She is on the American Physical Society Board and Council of Representatives, and she is the founder of the award-winning Women of Color Project that shares best practices for applying to grad school and succeeding in academia. Okay, now that all the introductions are done, let's get into the questions. And first, let's start off with, why did you decide to pursue grad school? And maybe, Marika, I will call on you to start.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Thank you for those wonderful introductions. I am really impressed with everyone else on this panel. I'm not going to lie. You guys are pretty impressive. So to your question, why did I pursue graduate school? It's really something that's always been in my mind, to be perfectly honest. Originally, I was really just interested in having that PhD at the end of my name, which everyone will tell you is not a good reason to go and get it. If that's your only reason, don't do it. So I will say that is not my only reason. I have a very broad spectrum of interests, as you might have noted. Not just physics, not just astronomy, not just computing, but also theater and arts and all sorts of things. But what really pushed me to actually enter graduate school after getting 2 bachelor's degrees, because one apparently isn't enough, it was really the chance to do research. That was what really was interesting to me. I have been in school forever, and I really actually hate school. I hate homework, I hate tests, I hate everything about it. but I really enjoyed research. So when I had a couple internships at like Fermilab, where I was actually like researching interesting problems, I realized like that's what I really want to do. So graduate school seemed to be the place for me to do that, to pursue research in something that was interesting to me, and researching it at my own pace. And then, of course, having a doctor at the end of my name or at the beginning of my name would ideally make my paychecks bigger in the future, which is very important to me. When I returned to school, I was a single mother of an infant, so money was a huge concern. So I've thought that grad school was a way to combine my interests as well as, you know, a little bit of money. But it's really kind of a stepping stone for the rest of my life. I'm still in the preparing for the rest of my life stage. So graduate school is going to help me reach all of my goals, whether I'm end up building spaceships or, you know, I don't know what I'm going to end up doing, but I will have the ability to do kind of whatever I want to do once I complete this. So that's my answer.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I take it other people have very different experiences here. Maybe Lauren, I'll call on you next. Could you share your take on why you decided to pursue grad school?
Of course, I'll just say that Marika's little child has such an amazing role model. So it's so cool to hear all about your story and your past. In some ways, my answer is similar. I was able to do research as an undergrad through a few summer internships, and also my program required that we did research to finish the degree. So I had to do a thesis for both of my majors, which was really a fun time working on two theses at the same time. But I did really enjoy what that research process looked like and how much agency and autonomy that I had over what questions to ask and try to answer, and the ways to try to answer those questions. And just kind of could see myself really enjoying doing that for a long time, as a PhD can be sometimes. So obviously I didn't ultimately didn't go into grad school in the physical sciences. I'm at an information school, so I'm actually in information sciences. But that specific choice for me had a lot to do with seeing the sorts of things that I want to change in the world, and seeing how people who have PhDs are afforded a higher degree of credibility and authority and expertise on specific issues. And so I'm hoping to, well, I don't really know what I'm going to do with the rest of my life, but I'm hoping to spend a good amount of my energy on political advocacy. So trying to help get policies changed and improve policies over time. And people who have PhDs can influence lawmakers and influence government more effectively than people who don't. And so that was another part of it. Not only do I enjoy the actual day-to-day of the research, but I see it as an important tool for trying to get to where I want to get.
Well, thank you for that perspective. What about you, Sophie? What made you decide to pursue grad school?
So yeah, hi everyone on the call. I'm really excited to be part of this panel, and it's quite refreshing to hear the real similar motivation behind doing a PhD with everyone else. And it's interesting actually, because I didn't know I wanted to do a PhD, and I had no idea what a PhD was until finishing undergrad. Because for me, I don't have any close connections in my family who have doctorates. None of my friends were interested in doing a PhD from my local area. I kind of, to this day, still need to explain to my parents exactly what a PhD involves. And so kind of just the concept wasn't in my picture of what I would do. I kind of had this dream that I would do uni, I'd get my degree in physics and move into the world of work. But similar to Marika and Lauren, actually, it was through research and internships that I realized there's a real difference to kind of how your life looks in the two different fields. I'd done summer internships in a number of different types of work. I did some engineering internships. I did a data science internship, but my final one was in genetics research. And that's kind of where I was like, right, I really like the application of physics and mathematical skills and computing to healthcare. So then it was just a question of, well, how do I keep doing this? And one thing that I love about what I do now is seeing the impact of my work. So working in kind of the intersection with healthcare has kind of allowed me to move slightly away from the fundamental physics, but see it realized in kind of everyday life. And I've found that that's helped me when I talk to other people about what I do, when I talk to friends and family about science. They've got this now tangibility with kind of my everyday life. And I've really, really enjoyed that, actually. Something I didn't get so much when I was at undergrad. So essentially, it was a little bit of, I suppose, going with the flow. I kind of took opportunities as they came. I didn't have a clear idea of what I wanted to do, but I didn't say no to anything. And then essentially stumbled upon it by just realizing what it was that was motivating me to keep going in every day. And yeah, took that on.
Also, thank you. And I'm actually going to keep the question on you, but I want to say something first. So I'm not super familiar with the higher education system in the UK, but I think I understand that the process of going to grad school after your bachelor's is different than here in the United States. So as I understand it, it's common for people in the UK to say, go and do a master's program at a university, and then maybe find a different university to do a PhD program. Whereas in the United States, it's more common for someone to do a bachelor's and then go straight into a PhD program, which really means the master's is included. And so, Sophie, let's keep the spotlight on you for now. What were your primary considerations when you were deciding on where to apply for your PhD, for example?
Yeah, that's interesting. So I suppose it's similar, but yes, definitely there is a bit more of a trend to change institutions depending on what your field of research is. So I did a undergraduate master's degree. So it was integrated for bachelor's, but you essentially jump straight and graduate with a master's degree at Imperial College. I think for me, having done the 4 years, it was a case of, well, first of all, which institutions are leading for this kind of research? So I did a little bit of background about kind of brain imaging, dementia research, artificial intelligence, and stumbled upon UCL, which is world leading and known for its kind of research in that area. So that was a big driving factor. But actually, I think the realities were more the logistical questions for me, like location, proximity to family, financial considerations. How is this going to set me up for the next 4 years? Particularly given that compared to, say, going into industry straight from a master's in physics, my earning potential, is capped. In the UK, PhDs aren't as well funded as a regular career. So I was sacrificing that by choosing to stay in research. So I needed to then think about living costs. I've been able to stay at home and save on rent by living in London and going to a London-based university. So these were actually the driving factors for my decision to kind of choose where I studied, alongside the fact that it was a leading institution and I knew people who went there. So it's quite interesting.
Thank you. And I just want to sort of emphasize one of the points you made, and that is for many of us around the world, getting a PhD in STEM is funded. So it's typically the case that you will get paid a stipend so that you can support some of your living expenses, sort of depending on where you are in your life, including, of course, food and rent and all of that. And, I find that I sort of say this wherever I can, and I always find young students, particularly young Black students, who maybe are interested in grad school but don't know that they don't have to take out many tens of thousands of dollars worth of student loans in order to go do, say, a PhD in physics. But yes, thank you for bringing that point up. So you mentioned a lot of important considerations for applying to grad school. Lauren or Marika, did you have any other things to add? And let me just, before we move on, let me acknowledge LaNell. Hi, LaNell. Great to see you here. So we are talking about primary considerations for applying to grad school. And I was just asking if Marika or Lauren had anything to add beyond what Sophie mentioned.
Yeah, I can go. I had a lot of considerations when applying to graduate school. As you mentioned, I got 2 bachelor's degrees, and that was actually directly related to my search for graduate schools. I got my first bachelor's degree in computer science. And at the end of my senior year, I was considering going to grad school right away. And I was interested in computational astrophysics. So I was trying to figure out how I could get into astronomy because I had found out really late, I found out my senior year that astronomy was a major. I had no idea that people even studied this. So once I graduated, I was like, how can I, use my computer science to, kind of break into this field? And when I went to my second undergraduate school, I was actually trying to apply for graduate school, and they told me that, hey, to do astronomy, you have to have some physics background. And I had not taken physics since high school. So basically, I needed 4 years of physics courses to basically be eligible to get into their graduate school program. And so since it was going to take 4 years anyway, 1 class a semester, that's why I decided to just enroll as a full-time student and get another bachelor's degree instead of just taking classes for 4 years and not getting a piece of paper at the end of it. So my second bachelor's degree was really just remedial work to get me to the position to be competitive for graduate schools. After I completed that and I went out and applied, I realized that I didn't actually need to do that. There were a lot of programs that didn't actually need really for me to have a bachelor's in physics to do graduate school physics. It was just that undergrad. And I'd gone there because that's where my family was. So it was a location issue. I had an 8-month-old baby with me, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And so I could only really stay in Milwaukee. Milwaukee UWM was kind of the only school that was around. And the only thing that they offered me was taking remedial classes. So I did that for 4.5 years. And once I completed that degree, I then was in a much better financial situation because over those 4 years, I was able to work. I had internships pretty much the entire time. And because I already had a bachelor's degree, I was in a higher pay grade for these internships. So like I don't care about throwing out numbers. While I was an intern, most of the other interns were making like between $16 and $18 an hour. But because I had a bachelor's degree, I was being paid $26 an hour. So it was really, really beneficial for me to be in Wisconsin where I could get this nice pay and go to school and have like no rent and raise my kid around family and do all of that. But once I got that bachelor's degree, I was in a much better position to kind of reach out. I was also now married. I got remarried. So now I had a spouse that could help financially support me as well. So I was able to apply around the country and around the world if I wanted to, and I applied to 26 schools, graduate schools. And out of those 26, I successfully completed 18 applications. So I'm saying this to say that like, yeah, I tried to apply to 26, but this particular school, the transcripts didn't reach there in time. And at this school, a recommendation letter didn't get there in time. So out of my attempt to apply to 26 schools, only 18 had completed applications. And out of those 18 schools, I got accepted into 2. So, and that's not like a terribly surprising percentage of acceptance rates. So, a lot of people advise you to apply to like, 4 or 5 graduate schools. I personally don't ever suggest that. I say cast your net wide. So once I had my, kind of choice of the 2 schools left, it was a pretty easy decision. as to which of the two that I was going to. The options were my alma mater, which I just got my bachelor's degree from, that had basically tricked me into getting a second bachelor's degree, or University of Florida, which I chose. And it ended up being a very, very good thing for me because it actually has a Department of Astronomy, which is what I want to do. My undergrad did not have a Department of Astronomy. It was a Department of Physics that did astronomy too. So this ended up being really, really good for me. A very windy journey, but I had to make decisions at each moment based on my current situation. I couldn't apply to schools all around the country when I was a single mom, but I could once I was more financially stable. I also had to consider, like Sophia mentioned, going to grad school for me was a huge pay cut, huge. I make like a third of what I used to make when I was an intern. So it was a pretty difficult decision, but I was also able to balance that concept with the idea of like deferring my student loans from my 2 bachelor's degrees that were not funded. So a lot of these different things kind of factored into me deciding whether I was going to apply to grad school, and once I got in, whether I was actually going to move my new family, from Wisconsin to Florida. And it all ended up working out, but that's my contribution.
Thank you. And so, Lauren, I definitely like for you to answer the same question, which I think will be particularly interesting from you, given the big change in field from undergrad to grad school. So please also comment.
Yeah, I can be quick. I just wanted to make sure to jump in because I love this panel. Y'all are great. It's really cool how different our experiences are with this whole thing of how we all found ourselves in grad school. I was applying to grad school when I was full-time employed. I had, a permanent job that I could have stayed at for another 5 years if I wanted to, and that really changed the way that I viewed things. So I did only apply to 4 programs, and I chose to do that because I was extremely picky with the programs that I ultimately submitted applications to. So I did a lot of work in the fall to reach out to current students, reach out to what's really important is prospective advisors in your programs, and try to understand, who is at this university that I could see myself studying under, kind of becoming like a carbon copy of that person after 6 years. Because that's kind of what the advisor relationship is choosing someone that you want to, learn how they do their work, learn the sorts of questions they think are interesting, and then take that and turn it into your own sorts of projects. So making sure that the schools that you're looking at have advisors that do work you want to do, super important. And also for me, making sure that the students at those schools and the students who are working with the advisors I was interested in were happy was super duper important. So there were some schools that were on my long list that I didn't end up applying to because I heard questionable things about the culture, whether that was like just all the PhD students are miserable, or like specifically women in POC in this program are miserable, or sometimes there was only one professor that was doing work I thought was interesting, and that made me nervous because I didn't want to go there. Maybe that professor leaves or couldn't take on enough students or that sort of thing. So I just wanted to share. For me, it was really about the advisor and the culture. And given my kind of more stable situation, having employment that I could have stayed at for a while meant that I could be a bit pickier too. So.
Thank you for adding that. Now, LaNell, I know that our other panelists have added quite a bit about their considerations for where they applied to grad school. Do you have anything that you'd like to add to that point? If not, that's fine. I have a follow-up question for you anyway.
Yeah, so I'd like to add, so I agree with everything that's been said, actually. I would suggest students apply, yes, to many schools. I normally tell my students 8 to 12 at least. And to add to that, I would like to say that it's important for you guys to have a range of schools that you're interested in. So don't just apply to all of the top tier schools in your program. Of course, like pick your programs based off of your research interest, but make sure you have a range of different kinds of schools, whether it's like a range of state schools, whether it's like a couple of Ivies in there, whether it's like a couple of schools in the Midwest, et cetera. Just make sure you have a sort of wide net of not just in the number of schools, but also the types of schools you're applying to. For me, the schools that I ended up getting into, my top two were Harvard and
Recording
physics
in
general,
progress.
physics programs, physics of living systems, etc. I ended up going to Harvard because I was more interested in soft condensed matter physics as well, and not just the biophysics side. So I just wanted to add that just be the most important thing that you should take into account is the research you're interested in doing and whether or not those places actually have decent people to work with. Because really your experience there is going to be determined by your relationship with your advisor, and that is probably the number one thing that you should probably like consider, or making sure that you're going into a school that has like many people you can choose from in your field, right? If you go to a school to work for the one famous person in this one famous thing and he's an asshole, then you're stuck, or you have to switch to something else. I would definitely say do that. For those of you guys interested in applying, I agree with everything Lauren just said, but if you're applying to one of those like top tier IB PWIs, I don't trust the people who say they're happy there. So in my opinion, you're getting what you get. Like if you do get into like Stanford, Caltech, Harvard, etc., just know you're walking into what you're walking into. So I'm not going to sell you any fairy tales about that. And yeah, that's all I want to say. Yep.
Thanks. And so I have a follow-up for you, actually. Could you tell us a little bit about the Women of Color Project and how the teachings in the Women of Color Project were influenced by your own experiences in applying to grad school? This is a question from Garrett Williams.
No, thank you for that question, Garrett. So the Women of Color Project came out of an argument that I had at open house about why there were no women like me who had been admitted. And the only things they could say to me were, Black women don't like physics, and Black women don't have the pedigree, and Black women don't apply. The last was true. A lot of times I've gone to NSBP many years recruiting students to apply to Harvard, and I'm like asking like our admin, like, did so-and-so apply? Did so-and-so apply? Oh no, we didn't get an application. And I know exactly why, because I went through a few, so I've been kind of at PWIs for a while. Like since my undergrad, I just to give some background, from Memphis, Tennessee. I grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood. And so the transition to going to like this small liberal arts school for my undergrad was pretty steep for me. But as a physics major there, mind you, I didn't have physics or calc, and when I went to a small charter school, calc wasn't taught in my high school, so I struggled. And as a result, I was just always being told no. So my advisor was basically like, well, if you find these problems hard, then you probably shouldn't do physics, which is just so not true whether I was prepared or not. And it was his way of discouraging me and kind of like pushing me out of the field. And I was just like, okay, well, this man told me no. And anyone that knows me knows that if you tell me that I can't do something, I will literally just go out of my way. I mean, I got into an argument and created a program. So, I'll just go out of my way to prove a point. And that the Women of Color Project was actually, it started because I wanted to prove a point, and 3 years later, I'm still proving that point, I guess. But in undergrad, yeah, I was discouraged. And then I, ended up finishing undergrad. I did a bridge program afterwards because I knew I needed to strengthen my background in physics. And I thought, oh, if I got the scores and the test and everything, no one could say me no. And now I'm good. Now I'm on paper good. There's no reason for them to like deny me anything, right? And tried to get the support of the program to visit Harvard because I was interested in visiting and meeting professors, and they were not supportive. Tried to talk to someone about like, I paid for myself to go, and then Harvard was basically like, we like you should come here as a visiting student. So I went to Harvard early, and like did research and like stayed as a visiting student, and they paid for it. Because I decided to go and visit them, and came back and, let them know about the experience. And all I really received was, oh, well, it's not going to make a difference in your application, which is false. So because I got so much misinformation through my journey and was told no so many times, despite the fact that I like on paper was an excellent student, I had like co-authored like 2 papers in my undergrad, in my undergrad, 1 in my master's. Like I was an excellent candidate applying anyways. And even I was being told to not apply to Harvard. So that angered me. We had this argument at open house, and I brought up the fact that the reason why these women aren't applying is they're probably experiencing the same exact thing I experienced, because God forbid I, as a Black woman, be interested in going to one of the best institutions for my field specifically. Like Harvard has the #1 biophysics program, you know, in the country. It's one of the best soft matter programs in the country. So that's where I wanted to go. And, you know, God forbid that, because there has to be, you know, if I have a 3.9, there has to be some white and or Asian man who has a 4.0 who is somehow more deserving than me. So that is why the project started. And a lot of our programming focuses on helping students with their applications, helping students, just providing them tools to be able to better sort of represent themselves, so that they have a better chance in getting into graduate school. Because at the end of the day, like, you can't change your scores at this, depending on what stage you are. You can't change your scores. You can't change your grades. You can't change how much research you've done. Maybe towards the end you can, but you do have influence on one or two things. You have influence over the recommendation letter, making sure that you get a strong recommendation letter. That's one thing you do have influence over. But your main piece, the main thing that you can change in your application that can make a huge difference in your application is your statement of purpose. Because in the statement of purpose, what you're doing is you are crafting your story. You are crafting the way that they view you. So for instance, in my statement of purpose, I had to address the fact that I didn't do well in my undergrad, right? And because they have my transcripts. So there's a way you can do that in your application, you know, by highlighting, yes, I didn't do well in my undergrad, but in my master's, I ended up taking these courses and I ended up doing really well. And now I'm doing this. And then I came to you guys and took your courses and I got an A in your courses. So therefore, I think this is a better representation of whether or not I will be a good student here, or I'll be able to like survive in this environment, right? Those kinds of things. And these are things students don't know about. I had a student once during one of our shops ask, I have 2 co-authored papers and I might have a third. Should I put that in my application? Yes. Like, of course. But the thing is, a lot of us don't know this kind of information. We're imagining in her head, there has to be a white and or Asian man who has 4 or 5 papers, which is not true. Many of them don't. Like, it's just, yeah.
Thank you, LaNell. And thanks for all the awesome work you've been doing with the Women of Color Project. Very, very important work. I wanted to give the other panelists an opportunity to chime in on any of that before I move on to the next question. Anyone want to jump in there? No pressure if not. LaNell brought up so many important things. I didn't know if people were dying to get some.
Yeah, I can just add to that, like with the application strength, like, you know, I talked about, you know, I applied to 18 and you mentioned like, there's a lot of things in this application that you cannot control. And so, you know, in my experience, it was really interesting to see that like my university, when they talked to me about my application, they were like, we have to have you. You're so amazing. Like this, you're like the best student ever. But then I got, you know, 16 rejections. So that was like kind of hard to deal with. And I think it's true that like we are really amazing. It's just that, you know, maybe it's not showing up on the paper as well as we wanted to. So I wonder if, you know, if I had some more of that guidance, if I had been part of the Women of Color Project that I just keep seeing and have not actually participated in, you know, I probably would have, you know, gotten into more schools or something. So I think that's really cool. And I'm really glad that program exists.
All right, so
sorry, can I like respond quickly to what Marika said? So some of it also depends on who's on the committee, and it depends on your fit and match. It depends on what they're looking for. If they don't need no more astronomy students, they're not taking none. Like this is all like the sort of behind the scenes information that like, you know, I feel like not just me, but like other people have like gathered over the years. So I didn't want you to just be like, oh, this, like my application would have fixed it all, but it could have been a number of things. Yeah.
Sophie, I think you wanted to chime in.
Yeah, I did actually. This is just so great. I'm listening and I'm smiling and I'm just inspired by everything that's being said. I just wanted to kind of say how nice it is and refreshing it is to hear people who weren't necessarily so for me, I wasn't top of my year in undergrad either. I'd had actually people telling me not to apply for a PhD because you needed to be, so they have this thing at uni in the UK called a Dean's List, the top 10 students. And they were like, yeah, if you're not on Dean's List, don't bother, particularly for the type of PhD I wanted to do, which was 4 years long. They were like, they're super competitive. And I could have really just turned away and said, you know what, I'm not going to do it. These people are telling me they didn't bother. I'm not going to shoot myself in the foot and spend loads of time on my application. But I did it. And obviously, you know, here I am. So it's actually really important that that kind of message gets out, because I do think PhDs have this kind of rep of being only for the elite of the elite and not for you if you didn't get the top grades. And also, I think just thinking about other ways that you can kind of demonstrate that you're a good candidate. So for me, I think it helped that I'd had internship experience, and I acknowledged that exams weren't my best strength, but I knew that I really excelled when it came to coursework and extended projects, and given, you know, a long period of time to work on something and work through a problem. I just didn't like the time pressure, you know, tell me this formula now. That was just not me. So I think playing to your strength is really key, and just not letting that stop you from applying.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. So let me make a quick announcement that people that are the attendees that are watching this very great panel, please feel free to answer or ask questions in the Q&A feature of the meeting. Now, I sort of want to switch gears a little bit. It's still kind of on topic though, and maybe I'll start with Lauren. So for taking the next step, could you tell us about at least one thing you should have been better advised on during your final year of undergrad? And like, what role do you think mentorship plays in the process of taking that next step after undergrad? Maybe to grad school, maybe elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I not had a linear path. I graduated from college and then worked for 4 years before I found myself back in grad school, and ultimately not in grad school in physics. And what was tough for me in senior year of college was that none of my mentors, professors, what have you, had anything to say to me about anything other than grad school. So when I went to them and said, you know, love physics, but not sure I'm ready to apply for grad school now, because at that point I hadn't necessarily written off, like maybe I would apply for astronomy PhD later, but I really knew that I wasn't ready to do that at that moment. They just like didn't know what to say to me. I actually had one professor who was always so encouraging and supportive and great to me. And I came to her as a senior and said, you know, I'm just like, really, I need to like explore something. I need to go work for a little while and make sure this is what I really want to do. And her response to me was, well, why don't you just apply to grad school anyway? And like, maybe you'll decide that you still want to go, which was what I was exactly telling her I didn't want to do. But, you know, that's by design, right? Everyone who is an astronomy PhD is, especially now at least, maybe this won't be true in 5-10 years, but a lot of the professoriate is there because they did the straight and narrow. They got their PhD, or they got their bachelor's degree in astro or in physics. They went straight into grad school. They were great PhD students because now they're faculty. And so I think that was kind of my biggest struggle, was not having anyone to tell me, one, it's okay to not go straight into grad school. Sometimes that's better, right? Like if I had gone straight into an astronomy PhD program after college, I would have dropped out because that's not what I needed. That's not what I wanted. And just not having access to other people who had done that, right? Like now that I am someone who was in physics and isn't in physics anymore, I'm constantly being connected with these amazing people who are like, oh yeah, I also like majored in physics, and now I'm working at Twitter, or now I'm working at, you know, working for the government or something really cool. And it just feels like there's this cutoff that happened where I didn't have access to any of those people who could have told me where to apply and how to, sell my physics skills to other sorts of domains. So that's something, kind of my passion project. I'm trying to make sure everyone knows it's okay not to go straight to grad school. You can choose to do it later. You can choose not to, and that's all fine. So.
Thank you. LaNell, you want to chime in?
Yes, if I could do it over, that is one thing I would change. So some schools defer. I did undergrad, and then I did a master's 2 years, and then I went straight into a PhD. I've been in grad school. I'm in 5th year now, but I've technically been in grad school for 7 years, which is why I'm probably so lethargic, scattered, showing up to panels 25 minutes late because I just can't keep up. You do not want to be me. I am not an example of keeping it together. And I wish that I had taken advantage of an opportunity that Harvard does offer. A lot of people don't know this, but some schools offer deferral. You could defer up to like 2 years at some universities. Apply to graduate school, but take that break. I was just too dumb to do it. I should have taken a break and then worked and then came back, because right now I'm broke. Don't have no kind of money for emergencies on this graduate school salary. And like working myself to death, just diminishing. Not saying that I'm not, I'm hanging in there, but I'm just saying, like, take the break. If I could do it over, like, I really would have taken advantage of that 1 to 2 year deferral. Even if you want to apply now, see if your institutions you're applying to allow you to defer once you get in, right? Because you can consider deferring. That's also something you can always negotiate.
Thank you for adding that. So I want to ask the same question to some of the other panelists. And maybe I will point to you, Marika, and it would be great to have your opinion on this too, Sophie, given that one, your experiences are important, but also you're in a different academic system than most of the people on the call. And so, let me just remind you, for taking the next step, could you tell us about at least one thing that you could have been better advised on during the final year of college? And what role do you think mentorship plays in the process of taking that next step to grad school?
Mm-hmm. So I think it's first important to say that I consider that I had 5 years of senior year. So I had a senior year at my first degree, and then went back to school for a second degree. And the entire time I was post-bac, so I was technically a senior for those 4.5 years. And in between the first bachelor's degree and second bachelor's degree, I worked as a restaurant manager for 2 years. So I was in an industry. And I would say at my first bachelor's senior year, I was a computer science major. I had actually, fun fact, I'd actually started at school as a vocal performance major for singing opera. Okay, so that's what I first went to college for, singing opera. Then I changed to computer science. And so by senior year, I was a computer science major. And, my advisors, were really trying to get me to do basically trying to get me to find a software engineering job. That was kind of their motivation. It was a 4-year school, so they didn't have a graduate school program at that school at all. And that's what they wanted me to do. But I was on a different plane. I was young and in love, and actually my senior year I was pregnant, so I had I walked across the stage with a little baby bump and everything. So I was on a completely different vein. I was thinking about family, getting married, things like that. Then when I ended up separating, I decided to go back to school. And so then I was at another degree for 4.5 years, just kind of taking remedial coursework and working at internships. And at that university, I also didn't really have much advising, right? So when I first went and sat down and talked to the chair of the department, he's the one that suggested that I enroll in, physics 1, physics 2, physics 3, modern physics, all the physics classes, one semester at a time. That was his advisement. And looking back on that, as I said, I regret taking that advice. I really do. I don't think for my PhD, I have used anything from my physics degree that I didn't learn from computer science. Like I use more computing in my astronomy than any physics. Like I've never done any quantum mechanics ever in astronomy. But that was a class that I needed to graduate with. So I wish that I had more kind of like mentorship. I definitely attended a lot of like organizations. So as you mentioned, I founded and was on the board of Black in Physics Week, but also NSBE, NSBP, ACM, you know, like I've been in all of these organizations, which are supposed to like kind of guide you and give you that, you know, that professional perspective of how to kind of move on in life. And I don't know if I feel like any of the advice I got was good for my situation. I feel like most people were not really sure how to deal with a Black woman who does physics, who has a family, who's divorced and remarried, who, you know, does not only physics, but, you know, computer science, engineering, art, theater, singing, reading, writing, right? I do everything. And so it was really hard for me to find guidance. Everybody seems to be wanting to shovel me into a box. Everybody wants to know like, well, are you going to do this or this? And I feel like I've been fighting like, well, why can't I do both? Why can't I do it all? Like, I don't get it. People keep trying to explain this to me, but I just still don't get why I have to pick one specific thing and only do that for the next 50 years. I feel like I want to learn as much as I can and, you know, kind of integrate. I like synthesizing information. I like kind of taking from a bunch of different resources and putting it all together and like really understanding how things work. You know, I feel like I wish I had advising that would have spoke to that a little bit more. So I don't know how else to add to that.
That was perfect. That was absolutely perfect. Yeah. Sophie, I think you wanted to add in on that too. Is that right?
I don't even know if it's add more echo. Because I share the same feelings. Actually, I wish I had more mentorship. So I mean, I suppose in the UK, typically it's similar. If you're going to do a PhD, then you've kind of stayed in academia, and you know, you hear of people who went into industry and came back, and it's a huge thing. It's like, wow, you managed to make it back into the world of academia. You managed to get your way in. So I didn't even contemplate, you know, leaving academia and then coming back. That wasn't an option for me. It felt very much like I either choose academia or I choose work, and that's gonna be my path. And I think I would have really benefited from a bit more counsel on alternative routes and also different types of progression. Because now as a PhD student, thinking about even the next steps, you know, no one really explained. It was very black box to me. I didn't know what happened after you finish your PhD. What does it mean to be a professor? I know it's different in the States as well, but just in terms of the steps to get up the ladder, like what does that mean? And if I don't want to become a professor, how is my PhD still useful? What alternative careers can I kind of use my PhD for? So I think I would have definitely, if I could go back, seeked out a bit more information about, you know, the progression as a PhD student. But it was ironic is that when I look back, actually, I think there was almost mentorship, but unsaid mentorship, in the sense that within our network, the Blackett Lab Physics group in the UK, there is a girl, Dr. Yolanda Ihimi, who I think I'm very much kind of unconsciously been inspired by in my decisions, because essentially she did physics as well and then progressed to the University of College London, the same place I'm currently at, to do medical imaging. So my path has actually been very much shaped by what she does. We work in very similar fields now. And I don't think it's coincidence that me and the other Black woman I know that went to my university happened to end up at the same place. That's not to say I don't have a passion in it, but I do think role models are just essential. And seeing someone else that did that 100% made me think and believe in myself a lot more. So if I went back now, I would have believed in myself even more, and possibly cast my net wider and sold my skills to alternative types of PhD programs, different types of unis, maybe even have considered PhDs abroad. I was reluctant to leave home, but I also, now looking back as I've got older, do think that there's value in international collaboration and experience in different countries and stuff. And that's something I would have paid a bit more attention to. So yeah.
I couldn't agree more that role models are incredibly important. And I know that there are a number of role models associated with the Blackhead Lab family. So for everyone watching, could you tell us a little bit more about this group in the UK?
Yeah, definitely. So it's quite a nice story. Essentially, there was a professor called Dr. Mark Richards, who is currently teaching at Imperial College in the physics department. Now, he's great because he was the first Black lecturer I ever saw, and I was gobsmacked. Some of the people around me didn't understand why I was so excited to see him. I didn't bother explaining it, but I knew when I went home and told my family how much it meant to me. And he has been working there for a number of years, and over time has kept contacts of students that have passed through the department. So by the time it got to me, this is over the last 20 years or so we're talking, there was about, I'd say, 8 of us who'd all gone to Imperial, all done physics, but typically there's only 1 or 2 students per year who are Black in that department. The numbers are pretty low. So none of us would have known each other had it not been for Mark's. And what's quite important actually is the fact that he stayed at that institution for such a long time. I do think that there are pockets of teachers and professors, but as they move throughout their career, it can be difficult to establish long-lasting connections and networks. But since he stayed, he had all of our numbers, and essentially we got together and said, well, there must be other people, there must be other Black students, but it's likely that they just don't have that figure who's connecting them and keeping them in contact. So we said, let's be that network, and reached out via social media only during the pandemic last year, really. Started kind of having conversations online and trying to find all the Black people who are doing physics all around the UK and just give them a space to chat. And we've grown since to over 50 members. We've got students, professionals, teachers, undergrad students, and people in academia. And we meet virtually, and also since we've been allowed to in person. And it's so fulfilling for us. Yeah, it's a really great network. So I'll drop the link to the website in the chat, actually, if anybody wants to check it out and support what we do. But it's been invaluable, and we're just hoping to grow really and keep expanding the network, and now looking at actually encouraging the younger generation and those in school to consider doing a PhD, well, just consider physics and continuing that beyond school, really.
Thank you. So for everyone watching, I think what we've seen very clearly from speaking with our panelists is that Black people who pursue physics degrees have a whole world of varied experiences. And part of the reasons why we wanted to create Black in Physics was to create community of Black physicists. And so as you're going across different parts of your journey, make sure to lean on the community. Make sure you reach out to these people. Make sure that we're talking to each other and supporting each other. Okay, so I want to move on and eventually talk about work-life balance and burnout, given that is the theme of Black in Physics Week. But first, let me sort of give us a bit of a break for a second and talk about something that's important, but sort of less heavy. And that is the important elements of grad school application. So LaNell, she already mentioned that the statement of purpose is incredibly important. I could not agree more. I was in a good position to have a sort of well-rounded graduate school application package when I was applying to grad school. And I think a very important part of that package for me was my statement of purpose. I mean, I can't tell you how many tens of hours I spent on crafting something that was authentic, that really showed me in my true like skill set that was not cliche, that could really grab the attention of the people who are literally reading hundreds of applications, who might literally fall asleep while they're reading your application. And so I think that that's particularly important in statement of purpose. But for our panelists, what else is important, or what do you believe is the most important element of the grad school application? And maybe let me start with, actually, who wants to start? I won't pick on it.
I can actually start because for me it stands out absolutely is getting to know your advisor, your supervisor, as we call it. And honestly, it's probably the most important difference I've made, and why I'm really enjoying where I am right now is because my supervisor is really lovely, essentially. And I think one thing I didn't recognize before starting the PhD of how stark a difference it makes, and also how varied styles of teaching are, and supervision, and even just personalities. This is someone that you spend quite a lot of time with, and they can really influence and shape the direction of your studies and just your enjoyment. And also, more importantly, matters like mental health and work-life balance. So for me, I knew that me as a student, I kind of reflected and said, well, I know that I'm somebody who can easily overwork myself. So pairing up with a supervisor who is equally work-focused and work-driven would probably cause me to fall down a cycle, not knowing when to stop. And I didn't value at the time, when I was kind of finding the project that I wanted to do, how refreshing it is to have a supervisor who really does value work-life balance. He's got, a family, he's got a life outside of work which he values, and therefore that feeds into everything he does as a supervisor, and how he advises us on how much work we do, and so forth. So I think really reflecting on the kind of relationship that you want to have with your supervisor is important. And I spent a lot of time so with my program, I was able to interview with different potential supervisors before choosing my particular project. And yeah, that was just really important to get a feel for how different they all were. So I definitely say pay a lot of attention to who you choose, and kind of what they champion, and how comfortable you feel around them. Because it was such a concern for me as well, as a Black woman. I constantly kept asking myself, what if I feel comfortable? What if I feel like I can't be me? So it's really, really important.
Yeah, I can echo that. I think, Charles, you did a great job of kind of talking about how tricky a good statement of purpose can be. You're trying to do so much. You're trying to write cohesive narrative showing how you got, why you want to go to grad school now, trying to like brag on yourself and make it clear that you like have the skills and you've taken the classes and you've done the internships, trying to pull out how you are a unique individual and the personality, character traits that you bring that are unique. There's a lot there. But one thing that I know is also super important is, like Sophie was saying, doing your research on your advisors, and including that in your statement of purpose. So I know for my current program, it's basically, you have to say in your statement of purpose, who do you want to work with? Why do you think that advisor's work matches with your goals or your past work? It doesn't necessarily have to be both, but that's absolutely key. And something that I do want to kind of drop that I think is a really great idea that's happening in the information sciences, and I don't know if it's happening in physics and astronomy. There has been this movement in PhD programs to start these volunteer-driven application feedback programs. So I'm actually helping to run this at Berkeley's iSchool right now. We set up like a Google form, and students who self-identify as underrepresented in academia can submit their application materials in advance. And then we have volunteer PhD students who will send them feedback. So you basically get a free round of feedback from a current student in the program you're interested in, before you submit your materials. It's not through admissions. There's a whole bunch of like policy reasons why admissions can't touch it. But it's kind of just like a way of formalizing the advice that people can get from their friends, if you like happen to have a friend in the program and that sort of thing, and making it really clear that this is for, you know, like undocumented, first gen, low income, Black, Indigenous, people of color applicants. So I don't know if that's a thing that's happening in the physics and astro spaces, but I really am a fan of it, and I feel like it should be. LaNell?
Yeah, we've had a lot of success. So we also do that with the Women of Color project. So at the end, we do one-on-one coaching so the students bring their application materials and they meet with either a postdoc or a professor or a graduate student volunteer that reads their material. And I think that that's definitely been very successful. But I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it's really important to get feedback on your application. Find someone. You need to find someone to read your application material. Please find someone. I rewrote my applications like I don't know how many times, and make sure that like you make the recommendation process easier for the recommender, because they're professors. You need to send short emails to them. Can you write me a strong letter? Maybe a little more than that, but it doesn't need to be that much longer. And include your CV, right? Once you get a yes from them, send them your like CV and send them your statement of purpose. It's important to recognize that you're writing a statement of purpose too, because a statement of purpose is about, like, graduate school is about research. They want to know what you can do. And some students get the statement of purpose and a personal statement mixed up. Like I always tell students, only at most a paragraph of the entire essay should be about you and your struggles in your journey. That other like 2/3 or so should be about everything you've done and why you are an adequate researcher. But yeah, I think that you should definitely like get feedback on your application materials. It is crucial. And also make it really easy for your recommenders by sending them your statement of purpose. There are some professors who will tell you to like send them some bullet points, like remind them of why they should write a letter for you. And do not take a bad recommendation from someone, even if you know you have this happened to me, a spicy relationship with one of your recommenders. This is what I ended up doing. This person kept pretending that they were still supportive of me, and I knew that they were kind of being weird, and I wasn't sure if they were still supportive of me. But to protect myself, I only allowed them to send their letter to certain schools. I had like 5 recommenders, so I just kind of swapped people out. And noticed that the schools that this person sent their material to, I got rejected to all of them. So be careful. Just let go. Just because you ask someone a recommendation and like they say yes, they'll write you a strong one. If the relationship like goes sour, like don't be afraid to say never mind.
That's a really important point. Thanks for bringing that up. Marika, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a bit to add to that. I completely agree with everything you guys have all said. But I will say, I suffer from extreme anxiety and other mental health issues. And therefore, I was never bold enough to actually get my application materials reviewed by anybody, like never. So I am like amazed that I got into any schools because I mean, these are like literally first drafts that I sent, which probably explains why I only got into 2 out of 18. But that being said, I think it is extremely important to do that. I think that getting feedback on your letters is going to be extremely important because there's always going to be something that you don't see that somebody else does. I've actually personally reviewed a lot of other people's. I do this for other people, but I don't ever send my own out. And I'll see things that, you know, people will have assumed is like, oh yeah, I'm just expressing myself, and it comes off really aggressive or kind of whiny or things like that. So definitely get a second opinion. I absolutely think that is important. I also wanted to mention that when you're writing your personal statement and whatnot, like people have said, you know, this is your chance to brag about yourself. This is really your only chance. They're not going to interview you until they've read this letter. So this is their first impression of you. And if you can't say good things about yourself, then they're going to assume that there aren't good things about yourself. So you have to be able to understand what your strengths are and what you bring to the table. And it doesn't have to be grades. It doesn't have to be, you know, it can be other things that are beneficial for research. So maybe you are a really independent worker. Maybe you can, really understand tasks and synthesize information really well. So you might want to give an example of that, but really playing to your strengths and giving those examples is important. I also wanted to mention with the letters of recommendation, this is a really big, difficult thing to do. It is not easy for writers to write a letter of recommendation. It's not easy for the student to ask. Both steps are difficult, but have to be addressed. And from the recommender's point of view, they generally want you to succeed. However, they can only write what they know about. So the points of like sending your CV, giving them bullet points of things to talk about. When I contacted my recommender writers, I would literally like just brag on myself. Like, I've done all this amazing stuff, and don't forget I did this, and don't forget I did that. Because again, if they don't know, they can't put that in their letter. So you have to give them the tools to write you something strong. You also have to give them the time to write you something strong. So if your application's due in 15 days and you're expecting them to write a great letter for you and, have, no typos and addressed to the right school and sent on time, like that's not a lot of time. So you have to be prepared to not only request these letters from people that you trust, but give them enough time to do their job and provide the information. So before you even ask them, you should really already have a good idea of what your strengths are, what you're going to ask them to write about, what your statement of purpose is talking about. So your application process is not like, it's a long process. You need to be thinking about this for quite a long time and being able to provide that information. The other thing I wanted to say was about narrowing down your schools for applications. So like I said, I casted a wide net, but 26 schools is not all the schools in the world. There's many, many, many more schools than that. And so I want to add or agree that looking at the advisors and the research topics offered by the school is insanely important. What I have encountered here at University of Florida, for example, is there are lots of faculty in my department that all do a lot of really interesting research. However, the first advisor that I initially wanted to work with turned out to not be such a good person. So that didn't work out. And so I didn't end up choosing him. And so then the second person I chose worked with him for a year, and now he's transferring to a new university. So now I have a third advisor. So I'm literally down to like my number 3 choice at this university. So like, yes, it's great if you find like one faculty at a university that you're interested in, but try to find more if you can. Of course, if there's only one, there's only one. But I would definitely suggest that you also, don't get hooked on one person, because as LaNell said, you never know what's going to happen with that one person. And then you're stuck there and you have to choose some other topic. So that's what I got.
I just want to add very quickly, you said something so important. You said your second advisor left. Be careful, be aware if the advisor you're working for has tenure or not. A lot of students get themselves in situations where they work for professors who don't have tenure, and then they end up having to leave. So be mindful of whether or not this is a new faculty member and they can actually be there for the 6 years for the entire tenure process, or if you're entering someone who's going up for tenure in 2 years and you may have to find a new lab.
Yeah, and adding to that, so my professor who actually left, he actually did have tenure, and he just left for a better job at a different university. So he actually took a student with him, so that she was in a position to actually just go to this other university. I, however, cannot pack up my family and move to a different university, so I had to switch advisors. The other thing is I had actually asked a different advisor, and he actually turned me down, even though he did the research that I wanted, because he knew he couldn't fund me. And he did not feel, ethically okay to take me on as a student and not pay me, which I support. I agree with that. But that is another factor. You might find advisors that perfectly fit with you and do exactly what you want, but they already have 10 students and don't need an 11th, right? They should only have like 3. So there's a lot of different things that can go into what advisors there are, and what your options are. And I guess I'll also add, I know at my school, there's a difference in departments. This was something that I did not know when I was applying. Fun fact, I actually applied to the physics department at University of Florida because I did not know the astronomy department existed. So all of my preparation was for the physics department. But when I went on and, clicked the little buttons and did the little drop box, there was an astronomy drop box, and that's what I picked. So I ended up applying to the astronomy department without knowing it, and getting in, which was great. But I didn't even know that there were 2 separate departments. I thought it was just one department. So whatever field you're actually interested in, make sure that you also pay attention, because there might be a similar program in a different department that actually fits a little bit better, right? So for my specific situation, the physics department does have an astrophysics department in it, but they also have a separate astronomy department. And so, that might be good for one student or another. There's another actually Black female physicist at our school who's doing that. And so, me and her would have been doing the exact same thing had I gotten in that way. So there's a lot of options. Even if you do like the school, there's other departments, there's other faculty, there's other things that you could do to kind of make this work. So make sure that you kind of keep your eye out for that as you're applying.
Thank you for all of this. So we are running low on time, but before we end, I do want to talk a little bit about burnout. And so I'm going to ask a question to the floor. Have you struggled with burnout? And what is the importance of work-life balance? And what is one way in which you balance grad school life? Who'd like to take a shot at this question?
I'll start, and I'll try to be quick because I know I talk long. So I had a mental breakdown my first semester. I went crazy, and lost my mind. And what I ended up having to do was we have actually pretty good health insurance in our grad school. So I went and got a therapist, got a psychiatrist, got it all, and started talking to someone. And that was something I'd never really considered before, going to therapy. But I think everyone should do it, whether you have a nervous breakdown or not. It's kind of like maintenance. It's kind of like your oil change in your car. You just kind of got to do it, because if you don't, then your car will explode. So I definitely suggest that. The burnout that I experienced was very likely due to my, 8.5 years of undergrad. I already said I hated school, and it was 8.5 years of torture for me. I'm talking about in quantum, spending 13 hours on an assignment and getting 10%, that was every week. And that really hurt my mental. It hurt my confidence. It hurt my ability to think of myself as a human being. I felt like I was just the dumbest person in the universe, even though I literally had a bachelor's degree in computer science. I am clearly not stupid, but it definitely made me feel that way. And I never had those feelings when I was taking my computer science classes, and I've had those feelings when I was taking my engineering classes, but the physics classes killed me. And so that I really had to deal with, especially when I got to grad school. I was having panic attacks because the assignments just looked like the old assignments, from my quantum class. And so I was freaking out. So therapy is what really, really helped, going and talking to somebody about it. And then also things I wanted to mention this earlier, but Charles was a great actually mental health. I don't know if he knows this, but just things like Black in Physics and having this network of other Black people in physics who did it. Right. When I met Charles, he was not Dr. Brown yet. And so just watching his journey right there is one example that it's I can do this too. I can do this, right? Even though I'm struggling at this moment, I can make it through. So having those mentors, having those examples, and then talking to people about it really helped deal with all of that burnout.
I might jump in because I'm going to have to jump off in a couple minutes. But yeah, burnout, burnout stuff. So I part of the reason that I started working instead of going straight to grad school after undergrad is because I was so burnt out after college. And I know not all jobs are created equal, but I got really lucky. And in both of the jobs that I held the past 4 years, were really great about boundaries. Guys, 9 to 5 is awesome. I would, go to work and then I would leave the office at 5, leave my computer in the office, didn't have my email on my phone, come home, cook myself a slow dinner with a glass of wine, sit down, watch a movie, call my friend, go to sleep. And that was like every weeknight. You just don't have to do this thing that happens in school where you're constantly working. And I was a little foolish, and I thought that because I had done that for 4 years, I would be better about establishing boundaries in grad school. And I have a lot of friends who are in PhD programs, and I've heard how tough it can be, but I was like, I'll be okay. I've been in my PhD program for 2 months, and it's really tough. This thing that happens where you are in class, or you're doing your work, or you could be doing your research. So any moment that you're hanging out with your friends, or you're relaxing and reading a book or watching a thing, feels like time that you could be doing other work is just tough. And so I'm not sure, I haven't figured it out yet. Obviously, been here for 2 months. I just want to say that I think it's important to acknowledge that that can be a tough thing, and acknowledge that it takes work and it takes intention to draw healthy boundaries for yourself, and to, retrain your brain and say like, no, I am going to go over to my friend's house and drink tea and gossip with them for like 4 hours on a Saturday. And that's totally okay. And doing that enables me to do the other parts of what grad school requires that I wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So just to say, burnout's real. If anyone's cracked the code, would love to hear it. But it's surprisingly tough, even with like 4 years of mental preparation coming in. It's been hard.
Thank you for adding. LaNell, please go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with Lauren. I just want to add that like burnout comes in cycles as well. I think I'm in like one of the down slopes, as you guys, you can't tell, my energy is so low. So I'm kind of trying to get myself out of like this sort of burnout stage. But I will say one thing I have developed are tools to get myself out of that. I do go to therapy. I do sort of like do certain things to sort of reduce the amount of burnout that I experience, and also reduce how intense it is. I definitely had to do a huge shift, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, with my work habits. I was like working on the weekends all the time. And so we're in this culture where like, they're like, if you don't live in the lab, you're not being productive. And I realized that like I was basically living in the lab, and I still wasn't productive. And part of that was because I was burning myself out and I wasn't being productive, wasn't doing good work. So I learned to not go in on weekends and like try to keep a better balance. I do see a therapist. I do develop, tools, whether it's like podcast or like leaving in the middle of the day to go get my nails done or something, right? To sort of replenish myself. Building a community outside of the community, outside of the academic community, has been really important for me, in maintaining my sanity and like reducing burnout. It's going to happen though. But I think that you should think about the tools that you can develop that help you specifically sort of like get yourself out of those moments when you are feeling that burnout. Yeah.
I suppose I can go next. I think I definitely reiterate everything that's been said. I burnt out badly during undergrad. A lot of it was self-inflicted. I think I put a lot of pressure on myself. Just going into uni, I kind of convinced myself, well, I need to prove myself to these people. I need to show, but really, why? I don't need to prove myself to anybody. I just needed to, do myself proud. But I think just going into a space where I was one of few and looking around me, I just thought, well, I need to show these people that like, a Black woman can do it too. But it did result in burnout for sure. One thing that I found really useful actually is running. I really took that up over the lockdown period and tried to factor that into my week. So just taking a long distance run, put some music on, has become like therapy to me. So I definitely advocate for that now. And also, like LaNell said, trying to diversify the kind of people I was hanging out with, and I found it really refreshing coming back from a long day at uni, and speaking to my friends who don't work in academia at all, that worked in completely different fields. My best friend, she's like a film archivist, so it's just completely different to what I'm doing day to day. And just having conversations with people doing different things can just really bring you back into the world and remind you what else is going on out there. So yeah, those are my two pieces.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we are at time. It is now 3 minutes after 11:30, my time here in Pacific time. So thank you to our panelists. You have all been incredible, and you've provided us with so much wisdom. I've learned a lot from you here, and I think that everyone watching will too. To everyone else, thank you very much for being here. We finished this discussion talking about burnout. Please check out the essays that we have being published by Physics Today and Physics World all week that are about burnout, but from different Black physicists who are at different points in the sort of academic ladder. And so I think we'll learn a lot from these people throughout the week. And please stay tuned for all of the really exciting Black in Physics Week events coming up for the rest of the week. That's it for now. See you later.